In this video, we unravel the true cost of chasing the dream of living aboard a cheap sailboat. What looks like an affordable entry into the cruising lifestyle can quickly spiral into a nightmare of hidden expenses, constant repairs, and overwhelming stress. This isn't just one sailor's cautionary tale. It's a wake-up call for anyone dreaming of a life at sea on a budget. From surprise haul-out fees to the endless list of must-fix systems, we'll expose the financial traps that turn budget boats into bottomless money pits. You'll hear real-life examples, expert insights, and the one thing that could have saved this sailor from the trap he never saw coming. So before you jump at that tempting deal on a used sailboat, join us as we break down the true costs and what you must consider before making the leap. Stick around until the end to find out the smartest way to avoid falling into the same trap and save yourself years of regret. Hit like, subscribe, and tap the bell so you don't miss any of our deep dives into the realities of life at sea. Let's get started. João never forgot the day he first saw the sea. He was 12 years old and his parents took him to a beach on the São Paulo coast. The endless horizon, the sound of waves crashing against the rocks, and the gentle sway of boats in the distance planted a seed in his mind. Years later, at 35, a successful software engineer, but trapped in a routine of endless meetings and phone notifications, João decided it was time to turn that dream into reality. He wanted to live on a sailboat, guided by the wind and with the sea as his home. That's how his search for the perfect boat began, or, as he would soon discover, the perfect trap. After weeks of browsing online classifieds, João found what seemed like the opportunity of a lifetime, a 1980 Catalina 30, listed for just 75,000 reais. The photos showed a sturdy boat with a gleaming white hull, a spacious cabin, and a deck that, while needing a good cleaning, looked ready for adventure. The seller, a man named Ricardo, assured him the boat was in great condition for the price. João, thrilled, imagined nights sleeping to the sound of waves and mornings sipping coffee as the sun rose over the horizon. He ignored the little voice in his head urging caution. After all, the price was unbeatable, and he'd read blogs about sailors living happily on tight budgets. What could go wrong? João scheduled a visit to the boat, anchored at a small boatyard on the southern São Paulo coast. The smell of salt and seaweed filled his lungs as he arrived. The Catalina 30, named Vento Livre by its previous owner, rocked gently in the water. The hull had some wear marks, but nothing a good paint job couldn't fix, João thought. He climbed aboard, feeling the wooden deck under his feet. The cabin was surprisingly comfortable for a 30-foot boat. A small sofa, a compact kitchen with a stove and sink, a foldable table, and a bed promising cozy nights. The diesel engine, a Universal M25, looked old, but Ricardo swore it ran fine. João ran his fingers along the helm, picturing himself sailing to Ilhabela or Ubatuba. "This boat's brought a lot of joy," Ricardo said with a confident smile. "It just needs a little love." João asked a few basic questions, but his lack of experience with sailboats left him unsure. He knew he should hire a marine surveyor, but Ricardo insisted the low price didn't justify the extra costs. "It's a solid boat from the 80s, built to last," he claimed. Eager to seal the deal before someone else snatched it, João paid a deposit and scheduled the transfer for the following week. He was so enchanted by the idea of his new life that he missed the first warning signs. A damp stain in the cabin's corner, a faint creak in the deck, and a loose electrical wire dangling behind the control panel. A week later, with the boat officially his, João began planning his move. He sold half his furniture, gave up his rented apartment in São Paulo, and brought his belongings to Vento Livre. The first few days felt perfect. He spent mornings cleaning the deck, learning to adjust the sails, and planning his first big trip. At night, he read navigation manuals by lantern light, feeling like a true sailor. The marina where the boat was docked was a vibrant community, with other sailors sharing stories and tips. Mike, a grizzled American living on a 40-foot ketch, became a sort of mentor. He warned João, "Cheap boats are like old houses. They're always full of surprises." João laughed, thinking Mike was exaggerating. After all, he'd bought Vento Livre at a great price, and the boat seemed solid. But the first surprise came on a rainy morning 3 weeks after the purchase. João woke to the sound of dripping inside the cabin. He traced the noise to the base of the mast where a puddle was forming on the floor. Water was seeping through a poorly sealed deck fitting. He tried patching it with marine tape, but the leak persisted. Frustrated, João decided to inspect the boat more thoroughly. That's when he dove to check the hull, and his excitement turned to worry. Below the waterline, João noticed a thin crack at the junction between the lead keel and the fiberglass hull. It wasn't very visible, but it seemed to extend a few centimeters. He took photos and searched on his phone, typing "crack in keel Catalina 30." What he found chilled him. Sailing forums discussed a problem called the Catalina smile, a common issue in older Catalina 30 models. The crack, caused by hull flexing or water infiltration, could compromise the boat's structure. Worse, the bolts securing the keel to the hull might be corroded, requiring an expensive and complex repair. João spent the night reading accounts from other owners. Some described repairs costing over 20,000 reais. Others suggested that if the crack was small, the boat could still sail safely. Desperate for guidance, he showed the photos to Mike the next day. "That's a Catalina classic," Mike said, frowning. "You need to haul the boat out and drop the keel to inspect the bolts. If they're corroded, fix it now. Ignoring it could cost you the boat, or worse." João felt a knot in his stomach. He'd spent nearly all his savings on buying vento livre and moving. Hiring a boatyard to haul the boat and do the repair seemed like a financial nightmare. Still, he scheduled a consultation with a marine surveyor named Carlos, known in the area for his expertise with older sailboats. Carlos inspected the boat for 2 hours, climbing up and down with tools, tapping the deck with a hammer, and examining every corner of the cabin. When he finished, he handed João a report that felt like a sentence. "The keel crack isn't the only issue," Carlos said gravely. "The deck has soft spots, likely rot in the balsa core. The electrical system is a mess, with old wiring and corroded connections. And the engine? It's got low compression. It might run for a while, but it'll let you down soon." João tried to stay composed, but Carlos's words echoed in his mind. He asked about costs. Carlos gave an initial estimate: 20,000 reais to fix the keel, 7,500 reais to repair the deck, 10,000 reais to upgrade the electrical system, and at least 15,000 reais to overhaul the engine. The total was nearly double what João had paid for the boat. He felt cheated, not just by Ricardo, but by his own naivety. How could he have thought a 40-year-old sailboat, bought at such a low price, wouldn't have issues? In the days that followed, João oscillated between anger and determination. He didn't want to give up on the dream, but he couldn't ignore the problems. He decided to start with the keel repair, the most urgent. He hired a boatyard to haul vento livre and drop the keel. The process was a spectacle. The boat was lifted by a crane, revealing a hull covered in barnacles. The keel, a nearly 2-ton lead piece, was carefully unbolted. When the bolts were removed, João saw what he feared. 2 were so corroded they looked ready to snap. The boatyard recommended replacing all the bolts and reinforcing the hull's base with extra layers of fiberglass. The final cost of the repair was 22,500 reais, more than João had planned. While the boat was in the yard, João tackled the deck issue. The soft spots identified by Carlos were the result of years of leaks through deck fittings like handrails and mast supports. Water had seeped into the balsa core, turning it into a rotten mess. Trying to save money, João decided to do part of the repair himself. He spent days with a saw, cutting out the damaged deck areas, revealing a larger extent of rot than he'd imagined. The smell of mold was unbearable, and each piece of soggy balsa he removed felt like a reminder of his impulsive decision. In the end, he hired a professional to re-laminate the deck with new fiberglass layers, a job that cost 8,000 reais. By now, João had spent over 30,000 reais, and Vento Livre still wasn't ready to sail. The electrical system, with its corroded wires and outdated panel, was next on the list. He tried fixing it himself, watching YouTube tutorials, but soon realized the job's complexity required a marine electrician. The professional replaced the panel, installed new batteries, and rewired the system, charging 12,000 reais. João began to see that each repair uncovered new issues, like an endless chain. The engine, which he'd hoped to delay, started failing during a test, spewing black smoke and vibrating worryingly. A mechanic confirmed the rings were worn and compression was low. An overhaul would cost 15,000 rays, or he could replace the engine for 30,000 rays. João opted for the overhaul, praying it would suffice. As repairs progressed, João spent nights at the marina, sleeping on an improvised mattress in Vento Livre's cabin. The smell of resin and marine paint clung to his clothes. He talked with Mike, who, despite his initial warnings, offered moral support. "Every sailor goes through this," Mike said, sipping coffee. "Boats are like relationships. You only find the flaws when you're already committed." João laughed, but inside, he wondered if he'd made an irreversible mistake. He started tallying the costs: 75,000 rays for the boat, 22,500 rays for the keel, 8,000 rays for the deck, 12,000 rays for the electrical system, 15,000 rays for the engine, plus smaller repairs like replacing plumbing seals and moldy upholstery, which added another 5,000 rays. The total exceeded 137,500 rays, nearly double the initial price, and he still had to pay marina fees, insurance, and ongoing maintenance. Despite the financial burden, João felt a growing connection to Vento Livre. Each repair, however painful, was a lesson. He learned to inspect bolts, apply epoxy resin, and understand how a diesel engine worked. He also began to value the marina community, where sailors shared tools, stories, and advice. One night, watching the sunset, João realized that, despite the problems, he still wanted this life. The sea kept calling. The first part of João's journey ended with Vento Livre nearly ready to sail, but bearing scars that told a story of naive optimism and resilience. He knew the challenges weren't over, but he was determined to make the boat his home. The second part of his story would reveal whether Vento Livre would become a dream fulfilled or a lesson too costly. With Vento Livre finally repaired, João felt a mix of relief and anxiety. The Catalina 30, now with a reinforced keel, relaminated deck, upgraded electrical system, and overhauled engine, seemed ready to take on the sea. He'd spent over 137,500 rees, a figure that still weighed on his mind, but the boat was, for the first time, in sailing condition. João planned his first major trip, a 50-mile crossing to Ilha Bela, a destination known for its crystal waters and sheltered anchorages. It was a chance to prove that all the effort and money had been worth it. On the morning of departure, the sky was clear, and a gentle breeze blew from the northeast. João checked the sails, adjusted the helm, and started the engine, which purred with a smoothness he'd never heard before. As he sailed out of the marina, he looked back, seeing the boatyard's silhouette where Vento Livre had spent months in repairs. Mike, waving from his ketch, shouted, "Watch out for surprises, kid!" João smiled, thinking the surprises were behind him. He was wrong. The first few hours of sailing were magical. The boat sliced through the waves with grace, and João at the helm felt in command of his destiny. He imagined nights anchoring in secluded bays, far from phone notifications and the pressures of life ashore. But in the afternoon, as the wind picked up, he noticed a problem. The plumbing system, which he'd patched superficially, started leaking. The freshwater pump, already old, stopped working, and water began pooling in the galley sink. João tried fixing it with makeshift tools, but the leak persisted, forcing him to shut off the system. It wasn't an emergency, but the inconvenience reminded him that boats, even after costly repairs, always had something to teach. Upon reaching Ilha Bela, João anchored in a tranquil bay. He spent the night under the stars, the boat's gentle rocking soothing his thoughts. For the first time in months, he felt the dream was within reach. But the return trip brought a new lesson. During the crossing back, an unexpected storm caught him off guard. Waves slammed against the hull, and rain soaked the deck. That's when João discovered another issue. The stays, the steel cables supporting the mast, were worn. One began to loosen, threatening the mast's stability. Heart pounding, João reduced the sails and sailed slowly to the marina, praying the mast wouldn't give way. Back at the boatyard, he called a specialist to inspect the stays. The verdict was clear: all needed replacing, a repair costing 5,000 rees. The technician also pointed out corrosion in some deck fittings, like handrails and supports, which, if ignored, could cause new leaks. Another 3,000 rees. Exhausted, João realized that sailboat maintenance was an endless cycle. Each trip revealed something new. In Vento Livre, despite its repairs, still bore the marks of its 40 years. Sitting in the cabin with his expense notebook open, João did the math. On top of the initial 137,500 reais, he now faced another 8,000 reais in repairs, not counting marina fees, 1,500 reais a month, and insurance, 4,000 reais a year. The total neared 151,000 reais, and he knew more costs would come. For the first time, he considered selling the boat. The dream of living at sea seemed more expensive than he could sustain. Yet he couldn't imagine returning to a São Paulo apartment, trapped in the routine that suffocated him. João decided to talk to Mike, who listened patiently as they drank beer at the marina. "Boats aren't about money," Mike said. "They're about what you learn from them. You bought a cheap boat, fell into some traps, but now you know more than most rookie sailors. The trick is to plan better and accept that the sea always demands its price." Inspired, João decided to keep Vento Livre. He began researching more deeply, reading forums and manuals on sailboat maintenance. He learned to inspect fittings, seal deck hardware, and monitor the engine. He also created a realistic budget, setting aside 10,000 reais a year for maintenance and emergencies. He hired a professional to replace the stays and reinforce the fittings, and slowly the boat came back to life. Months later, João made another trip to Ilhabela, this time without surprises. He anchored in the same bay, but now with confidence. Vento Livre wasn't perfect, but it was his. Every scratch on the hull, every repair on the deck, told the story of his journey. He started sharing his experiences on a blog, warning other dreamers about the pitfalls of buying a cheap sailboat. "Get a professional survey," he wrote. "Research the model's issues. And above all, plan for the costs. The sea is beautiful, but it doesn't forgive." As the sun set, João sat on the deck, breathing in the salty air and feeling the waves' gentle sway. He knew Vento Livre would bring more challenges, but he also knew he was ready to face them. The price of freedom was steep, but for him, it was worth every penny.